In the heart of Lahore, a city that never truly slept, where the aroma of cardamom and chili lingered in the morning air and rickshaws weaved between cars like dancers in a chaotic ballet, Sana stepped out of her house for her usual Sunday grocery run. It was early, just past 8, and the sun had begun casting a golden hue on the cobblestone roads. The city, though just stirring, was already alive with its typical energy. Vendors setting up stalls, children chasing each other barefoot near the corners, and the sound of azan echoing softly from a nearby mosque. Sana, a composed woman in her early 30s with a quiet strength in her demeanor, had always enjoyed this time of day, the brief pause before the city plunged into full motion. As she strolled through the aisles of the supermarket, she moved with the efficiency of habit, her list memorized, her preferences fixed. Flour, lentils, seasonal vegetables, dairy. Her cart began to fill with the rhythm of familiarity. When she turned into the cereal aisle, she was simply looking to grab the usual brand and be on her way. But then, in an instant that seemed to stretch out far too long, her world shifted. Her eyes landed on a man standing just a few feet away, examining a box of oats. He wore a clean, pale blue kurta, his hair neatly combed, his stance familiar. Too familiar. Her heart stopped for a second. It was Faizan, her husband, the same man who had kissed her goodbye just 2 days ago, claiming he had an out-of-town work meeting. Her mind couldn't immediately process the scene. He wasn't alone. Holding his hand tightly was a little boy, perhaps 4 years old, with thick, curly black hair and eyes that mirrored Faizan so precisely it felt like a punch to the gut. Standing beside them was a tall, elegant woman in a soft-colored shalwar kameez, her hand protectively resting on the child's back. The scene before Sana wasn't just shocking. It was intimate, unsettlingly so. It didn't resemble co-workers running into each other or friends shopping together. No, this was a family, a unit, and Sana was not a part of it. Faizan noticed her the moment she froze. His face paled ever so slightly, just for a split second, before he quickly masked it with a warm, casual smile. He approached her with the little boy still clutching his hand and the woman trailing hesitantly behind. With an easy tone and a practiced explanation, he introduced the woman as Aisha, a colleague from the office, and the child as her nephew, whom they had been asked to watch for the day. His story was smooth, almost convincing, but not to Sana. Not after the look that had passed between him and the boy. Not after the way Aisha's hand instinctively reached out to the child whenever he shifted. It wasn't the story that troubled her. It was the body language, the familiarity, the unspoken understanding that flowed between the three. Sana said nothing, only nodded briefly, offering a tight, forced smile before turning her cart around and walking away, leaving her groceries behind. Her chest felt tight, her breathing shallow. Her instincts, sharpened by nearly a decade of marriage, screamed at her that this was no coincidence, no misunderstanding. Something was terribly wrong. That night, lying beside Faizan as he slept peacefully, Sana stared at the ceiling, her mind a storm of questions and fear. The child's eyes, his expression, his mannerisms. Too many of them mirrored Faizan's own childhood photos that Sana had once cherished. Her pulse raced with a suspicion that refused to fade. She didn't cry. She didn't confront. She didn't speak a word to Faizan. Instead, she acted. By midnight, she was on the phone with a private investigator. A trusted professional, discreet and reliable, recommended by a friend who had once been in a similarly painful position. Sana recounted the entire encounter. The market, the boy, the woman, Faizan's explanation. Her voice trembled at times, but she kept it steady enough to give the man all the information he needed. The investigator wasted no time. Within just a few days, he returned with findings that left Sana in a daze of heartbreak and disbelief. What he revealed was far beyond her worst assumptions. 5 years ago, in a small town 3 hours outside of Lahore, Faizan had married Aisha. A quiet, modest ceremony that left no room for the kind of attention that could lead back to his other life with Sana. They had been living as husband and wife ever since. The little boy was not Aisha's nephew. He was their son, Faizan's biological child. The boy in the cereal aisle wasn't just a reminder of betrayal. He was living proof of it. Faizan had been juggling 2 lives for years, crafting lie after lie, traveling frequently under the pretense of business. Each trip was a journey back to his second home, to his second family. The investigator provided photographs, Faizan with Aisha, playing with their son in a park, attending parent-teacher meetings. Legal documents followed. Marriage registration, school records, rental agreements. Every shred of paper screamed betrayal. Sanaa didn't collapse under the weight of this truth. Her heart was shattered, but her mind remained focused. She didn't confront Faizan that night or the next. She didn't allow her rage to dictate her actions. Instead, she began to plan. She reached out to Aisha. Using the contact information the investigator had provided, she called the woman who had unknowingly become part of this painful triangle. Aisha was hesitant at first, her tone wary, her answers brief. But Sanaa's calm, direct approach and the undeniable truth she presented convinced Aisha to agree to a meeting. They chose a small quiet cafe on the outskirts of the city, far from anyone who might recognize them. When they met, the tension between them was heavy at first, but it didn't last. As Sanaa shared everything she had discovered, Aisha's composure cracked. Her disbelief morphed into anger. Her pain reflected Sanaa's. She had believed in Faizan's promises in his presence. She hadn't known about the other woman, about Sanaa. Over hours of quiet conversation, two betrayed women found themselves drawn into an unlikely alliance. They mourned. They questioned. They pieced together the overlapping lies Faizan had spun between them. And finally, they decided to take control of the situation, to expose the man who had robbed them of truth, time, and dignity. When Faizan returned from yet another business trip a week later, he was met not with routine, but with a reckoning. His suitcase swung casually at his side, and his usual confident smile played on his lips, until he opened the door. In the living room, Sanaa sat calmly on one end of the sofa, composed and silent. Opposite her was Aisha, her spine straight, her expression cold. On the floor nearby, their children sat, playing quietly, unaware of the storm about to break around them. On the table between the women lay the truth. Photos, official documents, bank transactions, every piece of proof laid out in stark clarity. A small video camera, tucked discreetly on a shelf, recorded everything. Faizan froze in the doorway. For the first time in years he was caught. Fully. Utterly. Unavoidably. Sanaa spoke first. Her words were not loud, but they struck with precision, slicing through every lie he might have prepared. She presented the evidence, one piece after another, never raising her voice. Then Aisha spoke. Her voice trembled with fury, her pain raw as she revealed how she, too, had been deceived all these years. Faizan tried to explain, to offer flimsy justifications, but none of it mattered anymore. The evidence was overwhelming. The room was no longer his to control. He was exposed, his carefully built world collapsing brick by brick. The confrontation didn't end in screams. It ended in silence, the kind that follows a storm, heavy and complete. For Sanaa and Aisha, that day marked the beginning of a painful new chapter. But it was also a chapter where they reclaimed their voices, their choices, their power. They were no longer two women living in the shadows of a man's lies. They were survivors, wounded, yes, but stronger for it. Bound not by rivalry but by truth. And from that moment on, Faizan would never again hold the power to deceive either of them.